live from Berlin, the outstanding play-by-play voice of Formula E, our friend. I hope this is working. Our man, Jack Nicholls is here. Jack, what's up, buddy?
Hello, how's it going? You all right?
Oh, my man, how have you been?
Not too bad, weird. No racing cars for however long, but they're back now, so it's all good. Here in Berlin, trapped in my hotel room. I can go from the hotel to the track, and that's all.
That's all you can do. So, explain where that is. So, Formula E did something very different. Now, normally, and I have to explain this because this audience doesn't know the sport, and they didn't hear our podcast that we did, which was so well received. And what Formula E does is they take over a downtown area of a city, and they have street racing. So in Rome, in Paris, in Marrakesh, all these places all over the world. But for this purpose, they found an airstrip next to an airport, and that's their bubble. And they literally made a makeshift track where there's no people. So technically, Jack is not even in Germany because he can't see anything in Germany outside of his hotel and the track.
Yeah, exactly. It's very strange, actually. And like you say, it's this old airport that was used in the 1930s. It was built in the 1930s, was the biggest building in Europe when it was built. And it was part of there was a thing called the Berlin blockade in 1948, where the Berlin was divided into East and West Berlin, and everything was divided up.
Yes,
and the Soviets.
We know all about East and West Germany.
Yeah, exactly. So the Soviets basically blocked off the Allies' area of Berlin to try and, they didn't get any food in, they couldn't get supplies in. So the West had to fly everything over East Berlin and land in West Berlin on this airport at Tempelhof. So a huge amount of history there, which is super cool. But it's disused now. But the whole apron, where all the planes park, basically outside the terminal building, put some barriers up and away they go. It's not dissimilar to sort of Sebring. There's a track called Sebring in the States, which is kind of similar.
So it's like Fast and the Furious.
Yes,
exactly.
Basically, right?
Yeah, it's not far off.
You got to get the visual for Americans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where he went. By the way, Ton Thomas played in the NBA, played for the Washington Wizards and some other teams. He's also a Syracuse alum like myself. I didn't properly introduce you guys. Jack has been the play-by-play announcer for Formula E since the sport's inception, which is only 6 years ago.
Okay, great. Well, nice to meet you, sir.
Yeah, and you. This is great.
So I'm interested to hear more about it because we don't know a lot about Formula E, but it sounds very intriguing, and it sounds like something that a lot of Americans would be interested in. So tell me.
You would think.
What'd you say?
Yeah, you would think.
Right.
Well, I think there's a few things to it. I think firstly, it is road course racing, which in the States isn't that big. Even something like IndyCar, the big thing is the Indy 500. Everybody loves the ovals, but when they go to race on a sort of European style road course, it doesn't really get the same kind of vibe. And it's the same with NASCAR. It's all about the Daytona 500, all these big events on the big ovals. So I think it starts off being a bit different there because it's quite a European kind of style of racing. Okay. And I think the other thing is it's been difficult for Europeans to get on board with the electric nature of it because people want their cars to be loud. People want their cars to be noisy. And I don't disagree. I love noisy engine cars. That's, I find them incredibly exciting and all of that. But the way the world is going, electric cars are going to be the future, and hopefully we can still use gas engine cars for special like historic cars in the same way that no one rides around on horses anymore to get from A to B,
but they still have horses, right?
If you want to go ride a horse, you can go ride a horse. For fun. So that's kind of how I see the future for petrol vehicles going. But at the moment, people still are a little bit skeptical, aren't they, about electric vehicles in general?
And one of the neat things, and that's how I got introduced to Formula E, was I was fascinated by the companies, the car companies that are putting a fortune into it. And Jack, one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is I want to hold these companies accountable. Meaning, if you are a company that is having great success winning these races, well, congratulations. That's wonderful. But now, what are you doing with the technology that you've designed to win these races in making your consumer vehicles more efficient so that now it is cheaper, easier, and better for the mass public to get these kinds of cars?
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of thing that will basically come with time. It takes time for these things to filter down. Nissan, who are in the championship, they had the biggest electric car ever. The Nissan Leaf is the highest selling
and nobody has
electric
it
car in the world.
And nobody has it here. And I test drove it and I couldn't go anywhere.
Interesting. Okay, but you have, I guess you have a lot of Priuses.
If our girl though, Anna's watching from Nissan, it was wonderful. It was great.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess you have, in America, you're starting to move into the hybrids. People have Priuses and stuff like that, but maybe not the electric. And I think it's dependent on the country as well, because America is, and you don't need me to tell you this, it's so big that the range of an electric car is a really important issue for you guys, less than it is in the UK. If I drive 6 hours in the UK, I go from London to Scotland. So like the south of the country to the top of the country, you can do in sort of 6 hours. Whereas obviously you guys in the States, you drive 6 hours, you're still in the same state,
same place.
You're still in the same. Yeah, you could drive 6 hours from one side of LA to the other side of LA. So I think that's something that is a big difference. And that's why you need the range in the States. And also you then need the infrastructure to be able to, at a gas station, fill up your electric car with energy really quickly. And that's the kind of, that's the part of it where it doesn't work yet. If you live in a kind of city, suburban area,
use London. Use London.
Yeah, exactly. If you live in London and you can park the car on your driveway, plug it in overnight, you wake up in the morning, it's fully charged, it'll do 150 miles. That's fine. That's all you need to do. But I think in the States, it's going to be a very different proposition.
Let's talk about COVID. And one of the things that I noticed, because I was following you on social media and we follow each other, when March happened and the NBA shut down, and then all of a sudden there was this massive shutdown, there were countries that were overrun that are really close to England. I don't know how bad it got actually in England comparatively to France or Italy, but I was reading about France and hearing about Italy, and Italy had a shutdown like you had to get a pass from the government to go walk your dog. Yep. And it was a shutdown. And now things in Europe are starting to open up, and family members are going back to work that I know out there, and Formula E is happening again, and soccer's happening again. There's all these different exciting things. And the one issue that I wonder about is, what did you guys think when you were told to stay home, and how much protest was there? Because here, that's a big, big controversy.
I think that, so when the NBA got cancelled, I was in Australia that week when it all kind of went a bit
crazy. For vacation?
No, for the first Formula One race of the season. So I was out there for the BBC, and the day of the race, or the day before kind of practice started, it got cancelled because one of the people in Formula One was tested positive with coronavirus. So suddenly I was in Australia reading all about the NBA getting cancelled. Everything's bad in Italy, and you got to go home. And I think because Italy was so close to the UK, that we saw the bad things that were happening there, the really bad things that were happening. And I think that, I mean, I don't need to get bogged down too politically, but I think our government did not do the best job in containing it. The UK has had worse than Italy, I would say, in terms of, yeah. It did not go well in the UK because they did not lock down hard enough. in my opinion.
Okay.
Italy, the passes to get out and stuff, it's a bit different because in Europe because European countries are all kind of together, they're all in one kind of block. It's a little bit different. So it's kind of like you always have to carry ID on you in Europe. And it was part of that. It was linked to your, you would get a pass sort of on the internet or whatever, and then
scan a barcode.
Yeah, and it would correspond. So it would kind of be like, in the States, something that would go with your driver's license, because you've always got your driver's license on you and that sort of thing. But no, the UK had it pretty bad. But I think having seen Italy and seen what was going on in Italy, it feels very real, and therefore there was no real protest, I would say, in the UK. There were people who didn't really believe it, and but I think ultimately the overwhelming feeling in the UK is there probably should have been more restrictions than there were. I would say.
Could you imagine just they let the hammer down and everybody says, "All right, let's do it."
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why I think initially they didn't want to do that, because they thought there's no chance that'll happen. But because Italy got so bad, it became obvious about how bad the situation could get, and that made people go, okay, fine. And our rules were that we were allowed to you were allowed to go to the store to get groceries and stuff, and you could leave the house for 1 hour a day of exercise, and there you go. That was it. Those were the rules. Crazy. And so that's how we lived for, I guess, probably 3 months under those kind of you could then do more than an hour, or you could go out twice, or those kind of little things. But that was basically how it was for 3 or 4 months. And it's amazing how quickly you get used to it, to be honest with you.
And let me ask you this: that was all throughout. It wasn't just like in sections here or sections there. It was all throughout, and it was mandated, and everybody had to follow. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
And then after that period of time, you saw your numbers going down. Correct?
Yeah, correct.
And then to the point where it's just, you got to understand how frustrating it is for us here, because it seems like it would be simple. It seems so simple, but over here, things are done so differently, and we've had so many problems. But there are examples like we can go to and use to say, listen, if you follow this protocol, it is proven to work. Exhibit A, right here.
I would say that if you don't let people see other people, then people can't transmit the virus to other people.
It sounds so simple.
Look at this.
This sounds so simple.
He's a wordsmith. Who knew?
Yeah, exactly.
Frustrating.
Well, but Formula E, even though it has the backing of the FIA and Formula One, and there's a comment in the chat room, the guys are asking, is Formula E a training ground for Formula One? And it's not exactly like that. It's a different skill set. Formula One is still considered like the major leagues. But I wouldn't say that Formula A is the next level down. Like it's on the side. It's a different. You'd be able to answer that question better. But my point being, they're a startup. They're only 6 years old.
Yeah.
Were you worried that and it was so funny, and I'll tell this, and Jack, you know this. I talked to this sport about working there, and thank God that didn't happen, because I'd have been the first one let go, and it would have been obvious. And the point that I'm getting at is, were you concerned that Formula E not only wasn't going to finish this season, but that they were going to permanently shutter its doors because there's so much, they're counting on revenue so much. They live race to race, like people live paycheck to paycheck. How concerning was that for you? And is Formula E out of the woods now because they're having these races?
So it's true in all forms of motorsport, actually, because like you say, you need the revenue, and revenue comes at a very basic level. A city will pay Formula E to come to their city. So some are different, but that's kind of the business model, is we pay you some money to come to our city. That gives us sort of brand exposure for the city around the world, and we make money back from people coming to see it and buying the tickets. That's basically how it works. And so we're now in that situation where if no fans are allowed to come, no crowd is allowed to come, then you've got the cities paying for Formula E, but get nothing back the other way. And I guess it must be the same in all sports in the States when things resume behind closed doors. But for the big things like Formula One, they get a huge amount of money from TV revenue, right? And I'm sure it's the same in the NBA, in base.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That's why they're having sports without fans right now.
Exactly. But lower down, and Formula E isn't operating at the same level as Formula One in terms of the TV revenue and stuff. You need to get the fans in because that's how the economy works. And that must be the same in as you go sort of lower down your sporting pyramids, you get to the point of where actually this team knows they get $20,000 a week from the fans coming in. So that means they've got $20,000 to spend, income, expenditure, all of that. There's just no income anywhere if you haven't got TV revenue. So I think Formula E is doing okay, but the bigger question is some of the manufacturers are, really struggling now. The car manufacturers, the Renault-Nissan alliance has been struggling and all of that. Can they continue to justify spending money on Formula E? So I don't think it's out of the woods. I think it's pretty
That's a great point.
Healthy, but you just don't know what's going to happen in the future because you've got this obviously COVID situation now, but what effect is that going to have on the economy overall? Because with the crash in 2008, then 4 major manufacturers pulled out of Formula One: Honda, BMW, Toyota, and another I can't remember. In the crash in 2008, we're all like, right, we can't be spending £200 million a year now on Formula One because we're not selling any cars. No one's got any money. So it's the longer lasting effects of COVID that are going to be fascinating and difficult as well.
Ton.
Wow. I mean, I understand and that's what we've talked about a lot as far as the economic motivation and the economic impact of shutting down. But being able to do so safely, that's the part where we're having trouble. And right now, the only thing that we've seen that has been able to open back up in a safe way have been the 2 bubble situations that we have with the NBA and the NHL system. But nothing else has worked.
Nothing. Right. Baseball is a mess. I mean, Jack, you see my tweets. Like, baseball is an absolute disaster. It's an
didn't a whole team get
the St. Louis Cardinals have played 5 games. If they're going to complete their season, they need to play 55 games in 45 days. They can't do it. They can't.
Yeah.
Do it. And if they delay the playoffs because of that, you're going to be playing your World Series well into November. And I've said before on this show, my fantasy World Series is the Cleveland Indians and the Colorado Rockies in the World Series, and a blizzard wipes out both cities. That would be a fantasy. It would absolutely be my fantasy. When you see, and the NHL, and this is the other point that I was going to make beforehand, the NHL didn't feel comfortable having their bubble in America. Because Canada is doing very well. Canada is doing exceptionally well because they're unified. Again, I'm not telling you what political slant to follow, but they're on one track. And so Gary Bettman, whether he did it consciously or subconsciously, he gave a big middle finger to the United States because the original bubbles were Las Vegas, Columbus, Ohio, and Pittsburgh. And now it's in Edmonton and Toronto, and it's doing wonderfully. I mean, the ratings have been amazing, and it's fascinating. And the NBA, they have this Disney World bubble, which even though it's in Orlando, it's not really in Orlando because it's miles away from anything civilization. And there's only 3 roads that get there. So you're really isolated. And that sport's done wonderful. And their playoffs are going to start soon. And that's when they're going to ramp up and get really big. But we don't know how non-bubble sports can happen. And what I thought was fascinating, and I want to get your thought on this because you're also a big soccer fan, European football. And Bundesliga, they restarted without fans. And they had, for a while, they were the only sport going.
Yeah.
And what I thought was amazing is someone in America translated their protocol book. And in their 50-page book, there's a whole chapter on what the players should do when they get home, like when they leave the stadium.
Yeah.
And in baseball, there's a 101-page protocol book and not a word about what to do when you leave the player parking lot in any ballpark in America. And it just goes to show you like how stupid we all are as Americans. And I'm mortified. And I've said that to you beforehand. I just wonder whether or not people are looking at the European model and are going to start to smarten up and say, you know what? The only way we're going to beat this thing is to shut it down. And I wonder if in January, and I've talked to Atan a lot about that, in January when we think there'll be a new administration, they come in and give the grim news and just say, we'll see you in April. But nobody's doing anything in February and March.
Yeah. Yep. I think the soccer is really interesting actually, because you're right. It's not a bubble in the way that, because so Formula E is a bubble. I'm in my hotel room. Right. Everybody's staying in the same hotel. I flew in, I landed, I got a COVID test. I then had to stay in my room for 24 hours till the COVID test came back negative. Then I just go to and from the track. Not allowed out here, not allowed out there. And so Formula E is one of the bubble ones. But like you say, in soccer, they're still doing the regular testing. But you're right, there is all of those guidelines in place, what you can, what you can't do. And it's similar in Formula One as well, because they're traveling around a little bit more than Formula E. And there are guidelines on what you can and can't do. You have to stay within your bubbles. And I just think that is the only way to get it done at the moment. Are there fans at the NBA games and things like that, or are they all no? And how are you guys finding that? How are you guys finding watching basketball without fans? And
well, at first it was kind of weird. And it's interesting. I was just seeing this thing with LeBron, and he was saying that it's an adjustment period for him to deal with any fans. But he only said that after they started losing. He didn't say what's the problem when they was. I like LeBron. LeBron is my guy. But I was like, you didn't say that before. But it was kind of weird seeing the monitors, to be honest with you, at first. And then after a while, you just kind of got used to it. And the fake crowd noise was kind of weird.
I can't stand the fake crowd noise.
But after a while, you just kind of get used to it with anything else. And I think we had a player, Chucky Brown, on the other day, last week, and he made a good point. Sometimes they have it too loud where you can't hear the announcers. So they have to just adjust the levels. Yeah. But, then you see who's in the audience. It's kind of working with it, but it definitely is a lot different. I will say that.
And that's the thing with motorsport, is that it doesn't really make much difference when you watch it on the TV, because you don't hear fans over the noise of these engines. Okay, Formula E is quieter, but
they sound like a Knight Rider. That's what I've been telling.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't get, the fans don't chant at a motor race. There's no cheers when someone overtakes someone, really, because I don't know why, but that's just kind of not how it works. And especially with something like Formula One, the cars are so loud, and IndyCar as well. If they're on a road course, you don't really notice the lack of fans at all. In an oval, it's a bit weird because the whole place looks really kind of ghostly, but sound-wise, when the race is actually on, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference.
If they're all in a bubble, why are the track announcers like Nikki Shields, why is she keeping distance, and why are the drivers all wearing masks if they're all isolated in a bubble?
I don't have an answer to you for that, Seth. No one here really understands it, but I think it's a belt and braces approach. It's a look, we've got it, because I think if I don't think it would be right to be seen to not be wearing masks and standing next to each other and all of this stuff. It's almost like
for optics.
It's for optics, and it's for setting the right example. I think basically. So
and that's what I think it is.
Jim in the chat room said the same thing right at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is for the NBA as well. I mean, they're sitting there in the bubble. They have had no positive tests the last 3 sessions of tests, and they're social distancing and having the mask and everything on. But I think that's a little bit more for just the optics of everything.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's fine. Yesterday, this young man Antonio Felix da Costa, he won the championship, and there's 2 races left. He's running away with everything, and the team championship is all over. What in the world are you going to talk about in the next 2 races? Like it's over.
Yeah, it's over. The championship is over, but you can still get good races.
Are you going to raise your voice for the fight for 3rd place? Come on.
No, but I will. But I will raise my voice for the individual race. I think that's where I still find Formula E entertaining, even though it's all done. I still don't know who's going to win the race on the next race is on Wednesday. You don't know who's going to win. The races are action packed, and okay, you lose a bit of the edge of what does this mean in the context of the sporting world, but you can still enjoy it as a sort of individual match. In the same way that I could watch an American football game and just enjoy that they beat them, or it was a close game, or they won it in the last minute or whatever.
You don't care
and
about
does that mean they're in the playoffs?
Sure.
Does that mean they're in the, I don't know, but
No, it's fair.
the occasion itself I can enjoy.
What about and Etan, I kind of mentioned this to you on Friday. Jack has such a unique job. He is the voice of the world feed for Formula E, which means Fox here in America, the British BBC Two, or who airs the games in England, but there's an English-speaking network in France, and there's an English-speaking thing in Spain, and he's in Marrakesh, and he's in this place, and he's in the. You're in what 150 countries? You said it on the podcast, and I don't remember, but you're on everywhere.
Yeah, anywhere that is English-speaking. If you're watching Formula E, then you get me, really. So Australia,
that's
South
wild.
Africa, all of that, and it's super cool. But it makes it really interesting when I then do other shows. So like there's a show called Red Bull Signature Series, which is on Fox, I think, and covers all sorts of downhill ice cross racing and motocross and stuff like that. And I do that sometimes, and it only goes out in America, and so you have, which is kind of standard for you guys. So I have to say things like with American words, because in English, I just say English things and Americans think, oh, he's just saying something stupid. But in America, a good example was there was examples where, so that, these guys would go from the quarterfinals through to the semifinals. And I would say, oh, Tom Smith progresses through to the semifinal. And they'd be like, the producers would be like, what do you mean progresses through? That doesn't make any. He advances. He advances through. He doesn't progress. That because that's just not what you would say in America. So I have to learn to not say my silly English words.
It's not silly.
It's not silly. We have a comment in the
different,
chat. Felipe Massa used to be in Formula One. He recognized that name, so that's a guy. We've had on Sports with Friends, we had Sam Bird, who made big news now. He left his team. He's going to Jaguar, which is, I guess, a big story there. I didn't know. And then I've had Luca DeGrassi on. He was amazing. He was so cool. And we actually recorded that podcast in the pit. So you hear all the noises in the background. They're like literally building a car while we're doing that. And then I had Jack on the podcast, and we're going to try to get Mr. DaCosta to do this when the bubble bursts. When I sent the email, I said, when the bubble pops, can we, and everybody goes back to their homes, we're going to try to get him on.
Yeah, well, that was cool. No, he's a great kid, 28-year-old, and he's a lot of the Formula E drivers came from Formula One, and so they had a reputation before they arrived in Formula E. But DaCosta, exactly. Sebastian Buemi, Felipe Massa, Nelson Piquet, all these drivers. But DaCosta never made it to Formula One. He was, he didn't make it, and he was 23 when he came to Formula E, and he's built his career now in Formula E. He's kind of the first Formula E champion, not
Right,
one that came from Formula One or already had an established reputation.
That's
so
cool.
I think that's really cool.
No, it's very, very cool. And you're staying safe, and I didn't ask a lot of your personal stuff. I mean, I did off the air, but you're okay. And then when you go back to England, you're gonna pretty much go back to staying home. What's your plan for after this week? Because he's calling 6 races in 9 days and then nothing for a while.
Well, not in Formula E, but I am doing Formula One. So I fly back on Friday morning straight to the studio to call a Formula One race from Barcelona. So it's going to be a bit.
So you're not going to Barcelona, but you'll be in a studio. That's
Correct.
what the American model has been. The play-by-play announcers, and to their credit, and I'll say this about baseball, basketball, the announcers that are not in the bubbles, you can't tell. They're super professional.
Right,
yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge, but it's an interesting challenge. You can't quite get the same information than when you're there. You can't get the tiny little nuggets of information that you would get from just being around, but it is doable. It is doable. So yeah, I'm all fine. I've had 5 COVID tests now in the last 12 or 15 days. So then I had another one yesterday. I'll have another one before I leave. 2 more when I get back to the UK, because they have to take it. The championship can't have you, getting it there and then taking it back to the UK or anything like that. So they're super, super secure on that kind of stuff.
Well, we appreciate this a ton. My last question to you, and this is just a personal one. What are plane flights like? Because I can't imagine getting on an airplane. Those things are such germ fests anyway, and there's no air circulation in that place. So if someone on a plane has COVID, everyone on that plane should have COVID. Unless you're in a spacesuit, I couldn't imagine. What's an airplane travel like?
It was okay. I mean, it's only an hour and 20 flight here, so there's no so everybody, you have to wear a mask the whole time you're in the airport, the whole time you're on the plane, which for an hour and 20 flight is not too bad. But if you were doing long haul or something, then that would get a little bit tough. But at the same time, that was my first real time wearing a mask for a long period of time, because in the UK, they weren't mandatory because you weren't going out anywhere. We were in lockdown. So you were just in your house, and you don't need to wear a mask in your house. So you'd pop them on to go to the shops and the store for like 10 minutes, and that was it. So on the way out, it was a bit annoying to have this mask on all the time. But now here we have to have our masks on, as you said, at the track, in commentary, all of these. So I've got my mask on all day. So now you kind of get used to it in the end. After doing it for 8 days, like it's good to get it off at the end of the day for sure. And at lunchtime, obviously you can take it off, and it's like, oh, that's nice. But you kind of forget about it eventually. First 2 or 3 days, it's really, really annoying. But so cool. It gets better.
Very cool. Well, dude, thank you so much, man. I know that you've been incredibly busy. The insight that you gave me on the podcast, and it was so cool to hang with you in New York last year. Last year, we in Brooklyn, New York, in the middle of nowhere in Brooklyn, New York. We were there in 1,000-degree heat. That's what I remember of Brooklyn, New York. But hopefully, Formula E gets to have a regular schedule, and I'll see you along the circuit, because I think the world of this sport. And I've told you before, I'm the only American supporter. I am the most vocal American in promotion of this sport, and they know it, and that'll never change.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's lovely to meet you, Seth. Have a good day.
Good to see you.